The atmosphere inside the grand venue for the highly anticipated Logan fashion show was nothing short of electric. Blinding camera flashes illuminated the room, capturing the sheer opulence of an event that had successfully hijacked the international press corps right out from under Forrester Creations. Katie Logan and Bill Spencer stood at the edge of the runway, their faces glowing with the triumphant satisfaction of a masterfully executed corporate coup. The music pulsed with a vibrant, youthful energy, perfectly matching the spectacular, fresh designs that were currently mesmerizing the elite audience. For weeks, the fashion industry had been buzzing with rumors about Katie's mystery designer, and the sudden, aggressive launch was designed to completely overshadow Eric Forrester's highly funded haute couture return. It was a ruthless business maneuver, but in the cutthroat world of Los Angeles fashion, it was a stroke of absolute genius. At the center of this magnificent spectacle was Hope Logan Spencer. Standing backstage, hidden just behind the velvet curtains, Hope's heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. She was a chaotic whirlwind of conflicting emotions. On one hand, she was carrying the crushing, suffocating weight of immense guilt. She had lied to her mother, Brooke Logan Forrester, defected from her family's legacy at Forrester Creations, and abandoned her beloved namesake, Hope, for the future. On the other hand, a thrilling, intoxicating sense of liberation washed over her. For the first time in her career, she was stepping out of the towering shadows of the Forrester dynasty to forge her own path. She had taken a monumental risk, but as she watched the audience gasp in awe at the spectacular garments parading down the catwalk, she felt a profound sense of validation. She had done it. She had successfully orchestrated a new beginning, and she had not done it alone. Standing right beside Hope was Deke Sharp, the brilliant, visionary designer who had poured his soul into this collection. Deke was more than just an employee to Hope. He was her most trusted confidant, her creative anchor, and her closest collaborator at Logan. Their bond was forged in the fires of mutual rejection. When Steffi Forrester Finnegan had unceremoniously fired Deke from Forrester Creations, deeming him unworthy and replacing him with Thomas and Zende, Hope had been the only one to fiercely defend his talent. She had nurtured his genius, brought him into the Logan fold, and built this entire new empire around his artistic vision. They were the ultimate underdog team to outcasts who had banded together to prove the entire fashion establishment wrong. As the final model completed her walk, Deke turned to Hope, offering her a reassuring, warm smile. It was a smile that Hope interpreted as a shared victory, completely oblivious to the dark, calculating shadows lurking behind his eyes. The music swelled to a triumphant crescendo, and Katie Logan took the microphone, her voice echoing through the massive venue. With a dramatic pause that left the audience hanging on her every word, Katie officially announced the bombshell. Revelation that would forever alter the landscape of the industry. The launch of the brand new line, Hope by Logan. The crowd erupted into deafening applause. The heavy velvet curtains parted, and Hope stepped out onto the pristine, illuminated runway. She looked radiant, embodying the very essence of grace and modern elegance. She reached her hand back, pulling Deke Sharp out from the shadows to join her in the spotlight. The flashing cameras captured what appeared to be the perfect partnership, a beautiful synergy of muse and creator basking in the glory of their undeniable success. The live stream, broadcast to hundreds of thousands of viewers worldwide, was flooded with comments of shock, awe, and overwhelming praise. But in the glittering world of high fashion, triumph is often just a fragile illusion waiting to be shattered. As the applause began to settle into an eager, anticipatory murmur, Deke Sharp gently took the microphone from Katie's hand. The audience, expecting a gracious acceptance speech or a heartfelt thank you to his muse, leaned in closer. Hope beamed at him, her eyes shining with tears of pride and joy. She was ready to share this monumental victory with the man who had made it all possible. However, the energy in the room experienced a sudden, chilling shift. Deke did not look at the audience with the humble gratitude of a rising star. Instead, his posture stiffened, his expression hardening into a mask of cold, unyielding resolve. When he finally spoke, his voice did not tremble with emotion. It cut through the silent room like a jagged, icy blade. "I want to thank you all for being here," Deke began, his voice echoing ominously over the state-of-the-art sound system. "But there is a truth that needs to be told tonight. A truth that I can no longer hide behind the glamour and the lies." The audience fell into a state of absolute, breathless paralysis. Katie's triumphant smile faltered, replaced by a look of profound confusion. Bill Spencer's eyes narrowed, his predatory instincts instantly flaring to life. Hope turned to Deke, her brow furrowing in genuine bewilderment. She reached out to touch his arm, a silent plea for explanation, but Deke violently pulled away from her grasp as if her very touch was toxic. He turned to face the sea of cameras, making sure his face was perfectly framed for the hundreds of thousands of people watching the live stream from their homes, their offices, and the executive suites of Forrester Creations. "These designs," Deke declared, his voice rising in volume and intensity, pointing a perfectly manicured finger at the models standing behind him. "Every single sketch, every silhouette, every fabric choice, they are entirely my own intellectual property. But the woman standing beside me, the woman who claims to be the visionary behind Hope by Logan, is nothing but a fraud." The collective gasp that ripped through the venue was deafening. The flashing of the cameras suddenly intensified, transforming from a celebration into a frantic, blinding interrogation. Hope's breath hitched in her throat, the air violently knocked from her lungs. The words hung in the air, incomprehensible, alien, and devastatingly destructive. She stared at Deke, desperately searching his eyes for any sign of a cruel joke, a misunderstanding, or a momentary lapse in sanity. But there was only a cold, calculated emptiness. "Hope Logan stole my design ideas," Deke continued, his accusations dropping like heavy, explosive bombs onto the pristine runway. "She took my life's work, slapped her famous name on it, and forced me into silence. She threatened to destroy my career if I ever spoke out, using her family's wealth and influence to keep me oppressed in the shadows. I am not her partner. I am her victim. And I refuse to let a plagiarist take credit for my genius any longer." The venue erupted into absolute, uncontrollable chaos. Journalists began shouting over one another, thrusting their recording devices toward the stage. The live stream feed exploded with a torrential downpour of vitriol, the public instantly turning on the woman they had adored just moments prior. Hope stood completely frozen, her mind violently short-circuiting. The ringing in her ears drowned out the screaming reporters. The betrayal was so profound, so entirely unexpected, that it manifested as a sharp, physical agony in her chest. The person she trusted most, the man she had defended against her own family, was publicly executing her on a global stage. Miles away, in the luxurious, glass-walled CEO office of Forrester Creations, Steffi Forrester Finnegan stood before a massive flat-screen television, watching the chaotic live stream unfold. A slow, chilling, and immensely satisfied smirk spread across her flawless features. While her father, Ridge Forrester, and her grandfather, Eric Forrester, watched the broadcast with expressions of utter shock and horrified bewilderment, Steffi simply took a slow, elegant sip of her sparkling water. She was not surprised by the catastrophic implosion of the Logan fashion show. In fact, she was the brilliant, ruthless puppet master who had orchestrated the entire spectacular disaster. Steffi was a Forrester, a fierce, uncompromising protector of her family's legacy, and she was never going to allow Hope Logan and the Spencer family to sabotage Eric Forrester's highly anticipated haute couture return without facing severe, apocalyptic consequences. The truth behind Deke's horrifying betrayal was a masterclass in corporate espionage and psychological manipulation. Days prior, when Steffi first suspected that Hope was secretly working with Logan to launch a rival line, she had quietly initiated her own devastating counterstrike. Steffi knew that Deke Sharp was the fragile linchpin holding Hope's entire operation together. She also knew that Deke, despite his immense talent, was driven by a deep, insatiable hunger for validation, prestige, and financial security, things that a startup line at Logan could only promise, but Forrester Creations could guarantee immediately. In a highly classified, off-the-books meeting, Steffi had approached Deke with an offer that was intentionally designed to be entirely irresistible. She played on his deepest insecurities, reminding him that Hope would always be the face of the brand, while he would forever remain a nameless, faceless laborer in the shadows of the Logan women. Steffi's bribe was nothing short of astronomical. She offered Deke the highly coveted, fiercely contested position of lead designer at Forrester Creations, complete with a multi-million-dollar salary, full creative autonomy, and his name on the building's prestigious roster. But the offer came with one singular, non-negotiable condition. Deke had to completely and utterly destroy Hope Logan on the most public platform possible. He had to wait until the exact moment of her greatest triumph, right when the world was watching, and tear her down with allegations of plagiarism and theft. For Deke, the internal moral conflict was brief and ultimately heavily skewed by ambition. He had convinced himself that Hope was merely using him to fuel her own ego, rationalizing his betrayal as a necessary step for his own survival in the ruthless fashion industry. He sold his loyalty, his friendship, and his soul to Steffi Forrester Finnegan for the keys to the absolute kingdom. Back at the Logan venue, the situation had rapidly deteriorated from a fashion show into a traumatic public relations nightmare. Bill Spencer, his face purple with unadulterated rage, signaled for the security team to cut the microphones and clear the stage, but the damage was already permanently inflicted. The narrative had escaped their control, spreading like a vicious, uncontrollable wildfire across every major social media platform and news outlet. Hope was physically trembling, her eyes wide with a traumatized, hollow shock. She looked at Deke one last time as security guards rushed the stage to escort him away. He did not look back at her. His posture was rigid, his chin held high as he walked away from the wreckage he had just created, already mentally preparing to step into his luxurious new office at Forrester Creations. Hope was left standing alone in the glaring, unforgiving spotlight, completely surrounded by a pack of journalistic wolves demanding answers she could not comprehend, let alone provide. The immediate fallout was catastrophic, completely obliterating the pristine, morally upright reputation that Hope had spent her entire adult life carefully cultivating. For years, the Hope for the Future brand was synonymous with integrity, honesty, and ethical practices. Now, in the span of 3 agonizing minutes, Hope was globally branded as a manipulative thief, a privileged fraud who exploited the hard work of independent artists to inflate her own legacy. The tragic irony was incredibly bitter. Hope had defected from Forrester Creations specifically to gain creative control and establish her own independent voice, only to be publicly stripped of her creative integrity entirely. The public, always hungry for the spectacular downfall of a beloved icon, tore into her without a shred of mercy. Her social media channels were flooded with hate, her professional credibility was instantly reduced to ashes, and her name became a trending punchline in the ruthless court of public opinion. The emotional devastation was equally profound, rippling violently through her fractured family. Brooke Logan Forrester, who had been watching the live stream with a complex, agonizing mixture of heartbreak over Hope's initial deception and reluctant maternal pride at the Beautifil designs, was now completely shattered. Seeing her daughter publicly humiliated, verbally assaulted, and falsely accused on a global stage triggered a fierce, protective fury within Brooke. However, the damage was so severe, and the accusations so meticulously delivered, that even Brooke's immense influence could not immediately shield Hope from the incoming onslaught. Brooke's anger, initially directed at Katie and Bill for poaching her daughter, was now a blinding, desperate panic as she realized the sheer magnitude of the destruction that had just been unleashed upon her child's life and future. For Hope, the betrayal was a profound, deeply traumatizing psychological blow that fundamentally altered her perception of the world. She had always believed in the inherent goodness of people. She had always championed the underdogs, offering second chances and unwavering trust to those who had been discarded by the ruthless corporate machine. Deke's calculated, venomous betrayal destroyed that fundamental trust in humanity. As Liam Spencer desperately pushed his way through the aggressive crowd of reporters to wrap his arms around his trembling wife and shield her from the blinding camera flashes, Hope felt a chilling, terrifying sense of absolute isolation. Even with Liam's protective embrace, she knew that she was standing entirely alone in the dark, suffocating ruins of her career. She had burned her bridges at Forrester Creations, alienated her mother, and now her new sanctuary at Logan had been transformed into a crime scene of alleged intellectual property theft. The road ahead for Hope Logan Spencer was no longer about designing beautiful clothes or launching a successful brand. It was about sheer, desperate survival. Steffi Forrester Finnegan was never going to be satisfied with just a public humiliation. The moment Deke's accusations hit the airwaves, the formidable, highly aggressive legal team at Forrester Creations was undoubtedly mobilized, preparing to hit Hope and the Logan Corporation with a massive, multi-million-dollar lawsuit for plagiarism, corporate espionage, and intellectual property theft. Hope was now facing a grueling, lonely legal and reputational battle that threatened to consume every aspect of her life. She would have to fight tooth and nail, completely stripped of her resources and her credibility, to prove her innocence against a man who held all the fabricated evidence and a rival CEO who possessed infinite power. The naive, optimistic Hope Logan was dead, brutally assassinated on the runway by the very person she trusted most. In her place, a hardened, traumatized woman would have to rise from the ashes, forced to navigate a treacherous war where honor was a liability. Trust was a fatal weakness, and the truth was nothing more than a weapon wielded by the highest bidder.